A peaceful protest organized by a group of concerned Nigerians to advocate for the release of the leader of the Revolution Now movement, Omoyele Sowore, turned bloody in Abuja when operatives of the Department of State Service fired at protesters. The Department of State Services fired live rounds severally and shot tear gas canisters into the air to scare protesters away. They also tried to run over some of the protesters, we're told. It will be recalled, however, that these protests were called after Nigeria's Directorate of State Services failed to release from their custody Omoyele Sowore, the convener of the Revolution Now movement, even after a federal high court had granted him bail. Could this really be a ploy to file fresh charges against Omoyele Sowore by the DSS, as has been alleged?
Well, this morning, from our Arise Abuja studio, we'll be joined by Yemi Adamalekun, Director, Enough is Enough Nigeria, and she'll be giving an account of her encounter with the DSS yesterday in Abuja. Moving on, we'll be speaking with Lanre Arogundade, Director of the International Press Center Lagos, on the bill being reintroduced by the Nigerian Senate to regulate social media use, and most recently, the hate speech bill.
And right after, Monday Ubani, Nigeria's ex-second vice president of the Nigerian Bar Association, will be our guest to speak to us on what the Nigerian constitution says when the president goes on vacation. Lawyer and human rights advocate Enibe Effiong is also going to be here to give his perspective on the ongoing DSS versus Sowore saga that's going on at the moment. And we'll also be catching up on news-making headlines across the globe today and review the newspapers with the Rise News analyst Emmanuel Efeni, while Ojiokpi will fill us in on what's trending around the world. It's going to be all of that and a whole lot more today on The Morning Show.
Welcome back to The Morning Show here on Arise News. It's now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. We begin in Nigeria, where members of the State Security Service have opened fire on protesters in Abuja and beat up journalists for covering a demonstration by the group Concerned Nigerians over the continued detention of the leader of the Revolution Now movement, Omoyele Sowore. It turned violent when operatives from the DSS attacked those present. Arise News correspondent Chima Nwakwo was there.
The protesters had a simple aim. They want the leader of the Revolution Now movement, Omoyele Sowore, released. But what began as a peaceful protest soon descended into bloodshed. Members of the security service fired live rounds and tear gas in the air, sending people fleeing. One person fainted, a journalist from Galaxy TV was assaulted and his camera seized, while a cameraman from this channel, Arise News, had to plead not to be beaten up and had his camera taken away instead. The leader of the civil rights group, which had organized the protest, says officials tried to pay him off so he would not go ahead with the demonstration.
The goal of this is to the people that gave the money, they know themselves and they know the circumstances in which they put us before they gave us the money. Exactly. You understand? So the people that gave the money, they know themselves. You understand? And we that they gave the money, we also know those who gave the money. Exactly. We are saying now that we know our lives may be at risk. Yeah. You understand? And for the greatest good for all Nigerians, and especially for Omoyele Sowore and Bakare, that we will have chosen not to say some things now. But don't worry, everything will always unravel itself.
That tactic from the DSS didn't work, and the protesters marched on. A human barricade stopping them in their tracks near the DSS office. Sowore has been in the custody of the security services for more than 3 months. The DSS say they want to release Sowore, but need someone to collect him. Plenty of people showed up to do just that. They even insisted on sitting and waiting.
And here we are, despite all the intimidation, harassment, and threats. We have come on a working day. Release Sowore, our brother, to us. Simple. Yes. Release Omoyele Sowore now. And Bakare to us. Now. The court has already ruled that they should be released. You have acknowledged that indeed the court has ruled. Yes. Why, President Muhammadu Buhari, why are you doing all this? Why are you turning the law upside down?
I wonder.
President Muhammadu Buhari, Why have you decided to ask the jurisdiction of the court? Why have you decided to ask the jurisdiction of the court? Hold on. Just sit down. Sit down. Don't worry.
Much more video of what happened to the volunteers has undoubtedly been destroyed, but it's clear from the footage available the DSS is in no mood to obey the court and let Sowore go. Chima Nwankwo, Arise News.
This is an extremely alarming incident that happened, and we can see so much from that report there. The DSS, having failed to buy the protesters, resorted to violence against them. Live ammunition, attempts to run them over. As were reported, they were shouting, "Kill them, kill them," over the right that we are all guaranteed by our Constitution for free protest. And I could also see from that report the placards. Some of the placards related directly to the detention of Omoyele Sowore. Others did not. Others talked about broader issues like stop the insecurity, stop the killings. I did see one orange beret there. So what that says to me is that you can jail a man, but you cannot jail the idea. This revolution now, it does continue, ending to killings and insecurity. So it's even the issues that were being raised leading up to that August 5th protest continue. So all these attempts by the government to suppress in this really brazen manner, this autocratic manner. I mean, people are literally fleeing for their lives here.
It's daunting.
All that does is further emboldens those who are completely outraged by this kind of treatment. This is a democracy. We paid a heavy price for the democracy we enjoy today. This is completely unacceptable.
Yes, you're absolutely right, because what is on display here is a case of official recklessness. And I think the government itself must consider it very embarrassing. And the head of the Department of State Security Service, should see that this is quite, an embarrassment, both to his office and in terms of the image of the organization that he leads. The matter at stake is very simple. The court had ordered that Omoyele Sowore and Olawale Bakare, who is also known as Mandate, should be released, right, on bail. Now, they've met the bail conditions. The reproduction warrants, the release warrants have been served on the DSS. The DSS, as a law-abiding organization, I use that phrase advisedly because every institution of state must be law-abiding, has a duty to respect the order of court and release these two persons. Now, on Saturday, this group, Concerned Nigerians, they went there, but they were told that, Sowore would not be released because it was a weekend. I think it was on Monday, or was it yesterday? We had Deji Adeyanju on this program, the leader of the Concerned Nigerians. And he had said that they were going to go back there, on a working day. So they went there yesterday only to be treated in this manner. I mean, the journalist from Galaxy TV, who were told he was beaten, his name is Walter, his camera was taken. Stanley Ibe of Channels TV was also rough-handled, assaulted, and also beaten up. I think his camera was also seized. Richard Oludare of the Guardian newspapers, his pictures have been shown everywhere. He too was brutalized. Now, our own
Stanley Okocho.
Yemi Adamolekun, who is going to be on this program, she was there on the screen, and she was at that event. She was harassed, intimidated. Her phone was taken from her and smashed. All through yesterday, I was calling her frantically, but later I got an email from her, and she said she didn't have her phone. And it's good that she's going to be on this program shortly to be able to give us, a direct participant account of what happened. But from the little that we have seen, it's really, really very sad that this is where we are at this point. After general elections, after government had said it will respect the rights of persons. If this is a case of subordinating national security to the rule of law, or subordinating the rule of law to national security, then of course it looks really ugly. And the government must wade in. The appropriate persons should ensure that this kind of ugliness does not continue.
And our own Arise TV colleague here, our cameraman Stanley Ugochukwu, was attacked as well.
Stanley Ibe, it was the one I was
terrible.
referring to when I said Stanley Ibe.
And I think you used the right word, ugly. It's such an ugly situation. It's such an embarrassment. And at the end of the day, this government continues to show that they do believe that they're beyond the rule of law. So quite frankly, if you believe you're beyond the rule of law, then what democracy do we have anymore? This is not how a democracy operates at the end of the day, and it's an absolute shocker that this can be going on, and this is absolutely allowed in the face of everyone. You're doing this in the face of everyone with no remorse whatsoever. It's tragic.
And yes, we've just sat here and listed the names of the journalists who were affected. Nobody knows the names of the DSS operatives who attacked them. All we know is President Buhari, the buck ultimately stops at his table.
Exactly.
It's not DSS did this, DSS agents, DSS operatives. This is the Buhari administration.
Thank you.
Yes, and it's completely unacceptable. Now, the Nigerian Senate came under fire on Tuesday for proposing the Hate Speech Prohibition Bill, which seeks to criminalize the offense with death as a penalty. The bill, which passed first reading at the plenary yesterday, seeks to establish a federal government agency to check hate speech. But senior lawyers, activists, and a chieftain of Afenifere, Chief Ayo Adebajo, who spoke with our sister outfit this day, condemned attempts to make hate speech a capital offense and urged the National Assembly to tread carefully on the issue. The bill, sponsored by a former Senate spokesperson, who is now the Deputy Senate Whip, Senator Sabi Abdullahi, is entitled National Commission for the Prohibition of Hate Speeches, Establishment, etc. Bill 2019. Abdullahi had sponsored a similar bill in the 8th Senate, which prescribed, amongst others, death by hanging for anyone found guilty of the offense. So it does seem somewhat like using a sledgehammer to kill a mosquito, death by hanging as a penalty for hate speech. However, it's often argued that hate speech does cause death. People have been killed, individuals and groups. Most recently, it was cited in the genocide in Myanmar against the Rohingya Muslims. It all started from hate speech. So trying to take a firm line is not out of order, but why the death penalty? That's going too far, in my opinion. And also, why the establishment of another commission? We have too many commissions. Surely the police can investigate allegations of hate speech. Why do we need yet another commission, which is going to have to be funded, which, well, from what the government has been saying, they're trying to cut down the costs of governance. We don't need extra commissions, what the police can actually investigate and prosecute.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, yes, hate speech is problematic, and, it's not something that anybody can defend. But who defines hate speech? Does this law, in particular, does it define what constitutes hate speech? Because it talks likely about, ethnically veiled comments that could do damage to the other person. But you see, the interpretation could be so elastic that at the end of the day, the law can be abused. But what we should note is that there seems to be an obsession with, the criminalization of the freedom of expression in Nigeria. And this has been there, over the years now, particularly since 2015. When you will recall that one Senator, Ibn Bala Nala, proposed a frivolous petitions bill, or what was known as the anti-social media bill. But maybe we'll go on break, and then when we come back, we'll take a further look at it. We'll be right back. You're still watching The Morning Show here on Arise News. Welcome back to The Morning Show here on the Arise News channel. Yes, Tundum, before we went on break, Leila, I was saying that the danger that we face here is the growing tendency on the part of lawmakers and also certain government officials to criminalize the freedom of expression in Nigeria. And to criminalize freedom of expression will be in violation of Section 39 of the 1999 Constitution, even if it is very clear that, yes, there are dangers involved in any form of hate speech. And what we're saying does not necessarily encourage hate speech. But if you look at the pattern, in 2015, there was a Cybercrime Act that was passed by government, which covers, any abuse of internet or, any form of violation of the rights of others. But then that same year, Senator Bin Nala tried to come up with what you call a bill to prohibit frivolous petitions and other matters connected therewith. That became popularly known as the Anti-Social Media Bill. And of course, concerned Nigerians kicked, and that bill had to be withdrawn in 2016. But government officials, politicians will not give up. And if you look at that law that was proposed by Senator Ibn Nala, what he was saying more or less is that, you are not allowed to abuse government officials or lawmakers or bring a petition that you could not defend. Now, this time around, you actually have two bills. On November 5, the Senate looked at a bill that was a bill to prohibit the abuse of the internet or manipulation of the internet. That was brought by one Senator Musa. And then you have this one, that is asking for a commission, the establishment of a commission for the prohibition of hate speech. The one by Senator Musa talks about fake news. Yes, there are issues about hate speech and fake news, but the violation of the right of persons to express themselves seems to be what the target, what the main objective, of these lawmakers seem to be. And I think that there are existing laws already. I cited the Cybercrime Act that is there. Then there are sections of the Criminal Code which deal with defamation, even if some of those sections of the Criminal Code still need to be reviewed to promote freedom of expression further. If they are looking for laws to make, that's one area in which they can engage themselves. But to come up with a death penalty, I think that's excessive, that's outrageous, and the people who have protested are, perfectly in order to say that, look, the desperation with which the National Assembly over the years has been trying to make it difficult for people to express themselves freely is something that people should really be worried about.
I don't know if we can really say that we're progressing when we can introduce a bill that is so regressive in so many ways, introducing or coming forward with the death penalty for hate speech, when really and truly your definition of hate speech also encompasses the freedom of expression, which is the rights of the people, is absolutely absurd. And that is I don't even know what to say, because when I looked down that bill and I saw that you can get death by hanging, I think they said if somebody else is to lose their life based on what you say, yes, hate speech is dangerous. People can die based on the words of other people. But what is your definition of hate speech? Because that is when we'll start to know what is really going on here. I think this is a bill that should make people scared. I think this is a bill that really does need to be stopped. It's outrageous in so many different ways, and it's one of the most regressive introductions that we have had coming forward by the 9th National Assembly.
I think existing laws are adequate, really.
More than adequate.
Exactly.
More than adequate. So, I don't understand why, we have to keep coming up with laws to check, freedom either of the media or of expression. And, the Guild of Editors, the Nigerian Union of Journalists, and so many NGOs have kicked. When Senator Ibn Nala came up with his own bill, he was proposing a penalty of 150,000, or an imprisonment of 3 months. And then if it is a corporate organization, a fine of between 5 million and 10 million. Even with that, Nigerians kicked. Not to talk of a death penalty.
Yeah. And fines of 10 million are in this bill as
This
well.
is what we're introducing the death penalty for in 2019. What does that say about us?
It speaks volumes.
It does.
Now, the ruling party in Nigeria, APC, walked into trouble on Tuesday as a federal high court in Abuja disqualified its running mate for the Bayelsa State governorship contest scheduled for Saturday, Senator Bio Barakuma Degi Eremienyo. Mixed reactions immediately trailed the disqualification, with senior lawyers suggesting the way forward to the party, which candidacy the contest now appears to be in danger of delisting from the ballot. Justice Inyang Ekwo of the Federal High Court Abuja disqualified Degi Eremienyo on the grounds of anomalies found in his Form CF-001, submitted to the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, for clearance in the poll. But in a swift reaction, Degi Eremienyo, who is the running mate to APC flag bearer, Mr. David Lyon, said the verdict was laughable, as it would not stand if tested in a higher court. Now, as the report says, the man is a senator, he's been a councillor, he's been a local government chairman. So his argument is that he has occupied all these positions. Why now is all his certificates being queried as to different names on the certificate, that those names are all derivatives of his name, which reminds us, obviously, of the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal when we were discussing Mohamedou and Mohammed. Is it the same person? So here we go again with that same incident. Now, he's clearly dismissing this, and it's obvious he's going to appeal. But what happens, because the election is on Saturday, APC cannot contest an election without a running mate. It absolutely cannot be done according to the Constitution. Although in today's Nigeria, we tend to flout the Constitution whenever it's convenient. But Section 187, prohibits that. So I don't know what's going to happen between now and Saturday. Maybe he can get a stay of execution while pending his appeal, because it's entirely possible that the appellate court might set this judgment aside so that APC does not lose out. But right now, it's looking like APC cannot contest on Saturday.
Well, I mean, those who have commented on the matter insist, they point out that Justice Ekwo is a very meticulous and a thorough judge. But of course, this looks like a tragedy for the APC on the surface of it. It will look like a technical knockout, because if this stands, then of course 3 days to the election, they cannot take part. The name of the APC will have to be removed from the ballot. But I imagine that, yes, certain options are clearly available. The APC, the affected deputy governorship candidate, can go to court, get a stay of execution, and then take part in the election, and the matter can then be determined subsequently. So the PDP should not start jubilating yet. But again, the INEC also has a role to play in this. INEC will also have to seek legal advice. But the position of the law at the moment is that there is no connection, as the judge ruled, between the gentleman's school leaving certificate and other documents that he provided to INEC. Now, it was the PDP that went to court to go and challenge his qualification. And he's insisting that the thing will not stand because he has the minimum qualification that is required. And if you read the judgment of court, it shows very clearly that there are two different names all over the place. And the judge was saying, look, it's not just that, the names do not look the same on the various documents. This is also a question of lying on oath, because that form CF001, when you fill it, you misinform or you provide false information, you may also be guilty of perjury. So there's also an underlying matter about perjury here. But again, it's up to him to go quickly to court to try to defend his right. Otherwise, you just have the People's Democratic Party winning the election by a technical knockout.
Absolutely, it'll just be a free show for the PDP, so he should try and explore his options in terms of a stay of execution, but that is quite a heavy blow a couple of days to the elections.
But although every time, politicians come around, they say, oh, I have the minimum qualification for the office, but it's not about having the minimum qualification. It is what you present.
Exactly.
That's the bottom line.
Every line, every information that is provided in that form, you must be able to defend it. You can't say, oh, after all, I have school cert, and I've been in the Senate because I have school cert. But of course, it's a matter for the courts to determine and for INEC to seek appropriate legal advice.
So we'll wait and see how that pans out. Now, an opposition leader in Bolivia's Senate has declared herself the country's interim president after the resignation of former leader Evo Morales. 52-year-old Janine Áñez took temporary control of the Senate, putting her next in line for the presidency. Lawmakers of Morales' Movement for Socialism Party were not present when Áñez made the announcement. Morales stepped down on Sunday at the suggestion, in quotes, of his country's military chief, following several tumultuous weeks of protests since his disputed election to a fourth term. Let's take a look. Well, for me, I think there was a little bit of neglect on the part of Morales' party, because Bolivian law requires that there are two houses of Congress, have to confirm or sort of ratify the resignation of the president, and they failed to get a quorum. Why did they just not show up and do what they were supposed to do? Having sort of dropped the ball in that case, this lady sees a vacuum, this Agnes, Senator Agnes, declares herself interim president, then they're now protesting. Why did they drop the ball in the first case?
No, the thing is, you know, Evo Morales is on exile now in Mexico. He left under very difficult circumstances. Both Morales and his party, the supporters, they insist that what happened was a coup. You know, Morales also quoting the presidents of Venezuela and Cuba. Now, would there be a vacuum? There is uncertainty in the country. The people are on the streets protesting.
So
they have barricaded. They have barricaded the great palace of the people, and you know, the vacuum could only lead to instability. And what has happened is that in the absence of the president, the vice president also resigned. The president of the Chamber of Senators also stepped down. The president of the deputy chamber also stepped down, leaving only Jeanine Áñez in the place. She was before now, what do you call it, deputy Senate leader. And then she just took advantage of that vacuum and declared herself the interim president.
Why didn't they
What
come
is
to
noteworthy,
work?
Exactly.
what is noteworthy is that she has the support of the Constitutional Court. You know, the Constitutional Court says, well, in the absence of all of these persons, she is the one to take over. The Movement for Socialism Party, they are insisting that this is a coup. And Morales himself has been grumbling on Twitter to say that
he can keep quiet,
this is a right-winger.
They had a referendum and he was barred from running again, so he can just really have
And
several
they should have come to work.
We'll take a break at this point and we'll be back with more news headlines. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. Yes, Tundum, before we went on break, we were discussing the situation in Bolivia and Evo Morales becoming a fugitive, if I may use that phrase, you know, perhaps incorrectly, you know. But you made a point. I think Evo Morales inflicted this damage on himself and his party. I mean, he came to power in 2006, the longest serving president in Bolivia, and then also the first indigenous person to assume the office of president. Yes, he achieved quite a number of things, fixed the roads, took Bolivia to space, managed the economy well, but he became greedy. He wanted to stay in office perpetually. This will have been his fourth term in office, you know, and what he did was to manipulate the constitution in such a manner that he will continue to run for election. And the people had become tired. The people are protesting, you know, on the streets of La Paz and Alto and in other places. They're saying, look, even with all his achievement, that Morales was only good at making promises and that they want change. So I think that whatever remains of the leadership in that country, and with the assistance of the neighboring countries, and particularly of the Organization of American States, the OAS, you know, everything must be done to ensure that Bolivia moves beyond Evo Morales as quickly as possible, and that the people do not begin to suffer in the long run for the crisis and uncertainty that has engulfed that country at this moment. Jeanine Áñez has promised that she will organize elections very soon. As interim president, of course, she cannot sit there permanently, you know, but first, before the elections can be organized, every effort should be made to stabilize the situation.
But they just had elections on October 20th. While they were counting that, Evo Morales' government suspended the, you know, counting of the results.
For 24 hours.
Yes. Why can't they go back to that?
No, what happened was that in that election, you need, in the presidential election in Bolivia, you need to have about 10 percentage point advantage over the next person. I guess when Evo Morales and the Movement for Socialism Party, when they saw that the margin was very close and that the thing was going to end up with a runoff in December between Evo Morales and Carlos Pesa of the other party, of the second leading party, they decided to stop counting for 24 hours. By the time counting resumed, Evo Morales was
they had
ahead.
Of abracadabra.
Was comfortably ahead, and of course, the opposition party kicked and said, "This cannot stand."
Yes.
You know, and this is the explanation for all of this crisis, apart from the fact that people were not too happy with the fact that, Evo Morales was imposing himself on the people.
Absolutely. And like you said, what's important now is the peace and security in Bolivia. It's a nation that has been under so much remorse in their own ways for so many years. And what we want to see is a Bolivia that is going to start working towards more stable days, really and truly.
Meanwhile, security forces fired tear gas in the street clashes in La Paz immediately after the Congress session. Following the demonstrations, the U.S. State Department warned American citizens not to travel to Bolivia and limited its diplomatic presence in the country due to the continued unrest that followed recent disputed elections. So this is the wages of any sit-tight agenda. All it does is cause chaos. But we've discussed this exhaustively, so we'll move on. Now, U.S. Democratic lawmakers have unveiled a list of 8 more witnesses who will testify in open hearings as part of the impeachment investigation into President Donald Trump, which start today. Lawmakers have already heard from all 8 in closed-door hearings over the course of the investigation, which Democrats who control the House of Representatives launched in September. Trump faces possible removal from office over allegations that he abused his powers by pressuring Ukraine to supply damaging information on rival Democrats and possible 2020 presidential election challenger Joe Biden. But with a Republican majority in the U.S. Senate, which would take a final vote on the matter, it is ultimately unlikely that Trump would be removed. I agree with that assessment, even though Joe Biden is trying to be, I don't know, optimistic or really overly idealistic, urging the American public to contact their Republican senators, saying that if you, the people, pressure them, then they will have to vote against Trump. I don't see that happening at all.
Well, what is new? I mean, this has been going on for about a month with the inquiry being conducted by the Intelligence Committee and other committees in the House of Representatives. But what is different is that today, for the first time, the hearings will be held in the open. And, this week, there will be 3 witnesses who had already made the positions away from the cameras. But now the lights will be on, the cameras will turn on the witnesses. 3 of them, former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, a deputy assistant secretary of state, and, the current U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Birtilo McKent and Yovanovitch. They will be on air, they will be before the House committees. But now the Republicans will have an opportunity to also cross-examine the witnesses. So now that it is in the open, the question is, well, would the witnesses, would they appear to be credible? And the issues at stake include 1, was there a quid pro quo, insisted upon by President Donald Trump with a foreign power? Was he trying to manipulate, the political process to the disadvantage of a rival in an election season? So the American public, of course, is divided right down the middle. Those who are supporting the Democrats, those who are supporting the Republicans in this matter. So once it goes on television, the inquiry goes on television, following the rules that have been earlier defined and publicized, you could see a battle for the mind of the average American, because this is election season. So, and I imagine that the Republicans will try to play off the politics of it and try to discredit, the witnesses whose testimonies may not favor President Trump. But as to whether it will succeed in the Senate, yes, he could be impeached, but it will be difficult to remove him, at least for now. The Republicans dominate the Senate. I think they have 53 seats there. And the Democrats would need up to about 20 of the Republicans to support them for them to be able to remove President Trump. And in an election season, I doubt if that will happen.
It's just far too high a number. Looking for 20 at this point in time, so close to the 2020 polls, is way too high of a number. And it's honestly just not looking likely. And that's unfortunate. It is unfortunate because this is a case here where no matter what the circumstance is, he has committed impeachable offenses, regardless of whatever is going on. So I don't see how they're going to get enough Republicans to support them on this. But really and truly, it's time for everyone to see what these witnesses have to say, what their testimonies are. And it's time for the American people, firstly, to really just know and have the truth, hopefully, in front of them.
Well, even if this process does not remove him from office, an election can. If he's actually impeached, it might do irreparable damage to his campaign, as it appears to have done to Joe Biden's campaign. This has also smeared Joe Biden. Right now, he's trailing behind Pete Buttigieg in the Iowa polls, which a few months ago would have been unthinkable. So we'll see how it all pans out. To Australia now, a fire service official has said more than 50 homes have been damaged or destroyed by catastrophic wildfires across Australia's most populous state before the emergency subsided. Rural Fire Service Commissioner Shane Fitzsimmons said although more favorable weather conditions were forecast for today across New South Wales, there was still severe fire danger, particularly in the northern parts of the state.
The initial assessments, the field reports coming in overnight as a result of the fire spread activity yesterday, new fires and existing fires burning across the landscape. We're estimating in the order, sadly, of another 50 homes that have been damaged or destroyed. And so far this season, that would then make it somewhere in the order of more than 300 homes. Most pleasing out of yesterday, without a doubt, is that we've got no life-threatening injuries. And we have no people unaccounted for right across the enormity of these fire grounds that are burning more than 1 million hectares. The weather outlook, whilst it's more favourable today across most of New South Wales, we've still got severe fire dangers up in northern areas of New South Wales, particularly up in the northern slopes, and widespread very high fire dangers, and that is still high risk given the enormous number of fires and the enormous area being burnt by fire.
It's incredibly alarming for the people living
Yes,
there.
and very unfortunate. I mean, the kind of stress that people go through each time these wildfires occur. And for those who still doubt the fact, that climate change is real, many of these incidents, including this latest one from Australia, will seem to prove the point that indeed our world is at risk. So much is changing because temperatures continue to rise. I mean, first it was the Amazon fires that we worried about on this program and how that posed a threat to the health of the universe itself. And then, of course, the fires in California, the whole of southern California and also Carolina, and the amount of tragedy that resulted on account of that. And then you'll find in Australia now report of wildfires. But one lesson we've seen in many of these examples is how, if the most part, the authorities respond proactively. They provide warning signals, they intervene, they evacuate people. And perhaps for us in Africa, particularly here in Nigeria, where we also have to deal with natural disasters or accidents, there are lessons we can learn from those other jurisdictions.
Absolutely. It's so scary because, like you said, for those who are still doubting the climate change is real, well, hey, look at what is going on in the world today. And it's a situation where we're learning a lot as well about how, I like what you said, Doctor, about emergency response and how agencies are responding to events like this and ways in which people should take caution. It's a scary time. Temperatures are rising and it's just a very tragic situation. So many people being evacuated, etc. It's so sad to see, and it's going on in so many different pockets around the world.
Oh, it's the whole gamut of disasters, melting polar ice caps, rising sea levels, uncontrolled wildfires. The writing is on the wall.
Or no water in certain places.
Droughts. We don't have floods.
Exactly.
We don't need any more proof that nature is getting well and truly fed up of
climate
mankind.
change is not a hoax.
Of course not. Now, Hong Kong awoke this morning to a third straight day of chaos following a night of intense battles between pro-democracy protesters and riot police on a university campus that saw some of the most violent scenes in more than 5 months of unrest. Morning commuters were faced with closed metro stations, a suspended rail line, and dozens of cancelled bus services, a day after police warned that the rule of law in the territory was on the brink of collapse, in quotes. Yesterday, the Chinese University of Hong Kong campus was the epicenter of the protests. The clashes raged well into the night, despite faculty and staff trying to mediate, with flames lighting up the night sky and dense clouds of acrid smoke.